Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello, and welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. My name is John Keir, and joining me, as always, is my co-host, Austin Davidson.
Heyo.
It's Season 3, Episode 32, September 4th. We are just a few short days away from the Steelers season kicking off. We're less than a week away, and now less than 48 hours away from the first game of the season between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Atlanta Falcons. Before we get started, though, just a quick announcement. As of this time, 11:40 on September 4th, the Tuesday, we have one more spot open for our fantasy football IDP draft. Remember, if you join, you will have a chance to win an autographed Steelers jersey from TSE. It's a mystery box. So, if you like fantasy football, if you like Steelers jerseys, then it's the perfect combination. Just go to NFL.com, search STS Football 2018, and the password is Super Bowl with the S and B capitalized. Otherwise, feel free to email us at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com, and I will send you an invite through your email there. So remember, the draft time is at 7:30 tomorrow, so we need that filled by then. Hopefully we get someone by then, because ideally we'd have this draft done before the first game. So let's get it done, all right? All right, on to Steelers news. So we're going to be going over the roster cut down and kind of our thoughts position by position. But before we do that, the Steelers did restructure the contract of Cameron Hayward to clear over $5 million in cap space, converting his base salary to a signing bonus. Thus, when you combine that with Vance McDonald's restructuring, that adds almost $7 million in cap space this year. The Steelers wouldn't do that for no reason. So what's incoming?
I think there might be a big trade inbound for a solid linebacker, especially after Tomlin hinted that there's something in the works when asked if he was confident in carrying only 3 outside linebackers today. I think the Steelers may make a splash with a trade right here. We'll see, though. We'll see what happens. You don't usually just make $5 million worth of cap room for no reason. Like, usually I feel like a team operates like $3 million just free in case of an injury, but $7 million is a lot to operate with. What do you think? Do you think it's just in case an injury happens?
Look, the way I see it is you wouldn't free up this much space for no reason. I think someone is definitely getting added to the roster. If you want to get right up to the cap, then you would think about maybe trading for someone that's a bigger name, like you were saying could be possible, or signing somebody or 2 players that are minor. The guy I was thinking of was the former Indianapolis Colt John Simon, who's an outside linebacker, but he's not making $7 million this year. So even adding him would still mean there's extra space. So I don't really know what's going to be going on here. It'll be interesting to keep your eyes on that over the next few days, too. The big news today, though, is that as of right now, LeVeon Bell has not reported to the Steelers facility. Some staff and players said that they believe that he's going to be in soon. Ben Roethlisberger said he hasn't talked to him. Most everybody hasn't been in direct contact with him. Marquise Pouncey said that he's going to be in by Wednesday. There wasn't really a reason given, but just that he's going to be. So I guess when is he going to show up? And depending on when he shows up, is he going to play on Sunday against the Browns?
At this point, I think we'll show up at Thursday. I don't have a real good reason for it. That's just my guess, because there's been no hinting. The teammates don't know. Marquise Pouncey's guess was Wednesday. He literally just said it because he just feels that way. He said he hadn't really talked to LeVeon. And I would just think he's coming Thursday. I don't know. I was trying to see if he posted Snapchats of where he was, but the last I saw was on Sunday where he was still in Miami. He's gone dark ever since then. He hasn't posted to his Snapchat story, which is odd because he's almost always posted on the Snapchat story. But regardless, at this point, he could show up Saturday in my eyes, because it doesn't really matter. The Steelers really only have one option at this point. They're going to have to make him inactive for the game. Not as a punishment, but let's say he shows up tomorrow, including tomorrow. That gives him 4 days to get prepared for the game. And that's only 3 practices because the Steelers don't typically practice the day before a game. So essentially, he has 3 days to get into a rhythm with Ben and the offensive line, and then an extra day to really learn the new playbook under the Steelers' new offensive coordinator. That is not enough time, not even close. So I think it's the best for the Steelers just make him inactive and let James Conner do his thing for this game. I think we reached. It would have been rough if he even came on Monday. I think that this is terrible because last year what was different was he was coming back to Todd Haley. Sure, they're switching up the offense because obviously you can't keep it the same year to year, but it's going to be even more different now that there's new offensive coordinator here. It's coming from Todd Haley to Randy. Like, it's going to be different. So I just think you have to make him inactive for game one. He's not going to know the calls. He's not going to know the plays. He's not going to know the audibles. It's 3 days is not enough to learn that. It's just not, and it's not enough to get into a rhythm. So what do you think? What day does he show up, and do you think he gets playing time at all?
You know, that's interesting that you mentioned that. With Todd Haley being on the staff of the Cleveland Browns, that adds more ammunition to the point you were making, that even if the offense is relatively similar to what Todd Haley was running last year, you have to think Randy Fichtner is going to change up some stuff, especially considering Haley's going to be on the other sideline on Sunday, and that just means more and more that you would need to be in the facility to understand what's going on. I think it'd be pretty hard to give Bell some pretty meaningful snaps now. I mean, you could probably give him some, but Bell's the kind of guy where you got to give him a lot or don't give him any at all. I don't really feel like he's never been a guy you just work in a little bit, which then again, it's more of a Mike Tomlin philosophy, but at the same time, I don't know. I don't think he'd play that well doing. He only had he had 13, 14, he had 13 touches in week 1 last year. He had 10 carries for 32 yards, 3 catches for 15 yards. He was pretty ineffective. I mean, the offense on the day was too, but he was not helpful at all. And he had 6 days to get ready for the game, and he'd have even less under a new coordinator. I don't see it, even if the offense isn't really that different. Some things are going to need to be different with the old offensive coordinator on the other side. So as every second ticks away, I find it less and less likely that he would play. So the Pittsburgh Steelers announced their 2018 team captains: Marquise Pouncey, Big Ben Roethlisberger, Cameron Hayward, and Chris Boswell. The new captains being Boswell instead of Robert Golden, who departed via free agency. And was Foster a captain over Pouncey in the past, or maybe I'm just misremembering?
I don't remember. I feel like Pouncey was a new face too, but I'm unsure on that.
Well, I'm not positive, but in any case, they're all very deserving. And I got another question for you. Going back to Bell, the talk around on sports radio nationally and locally in Pittsburgh has been that Bell just might not show up, period. And what do you think about that?
I don't think that's going to happen. The most he's going to sit out is 6 games. Because after 6 games, the franchise tag, the Steelers don't owe him anything. After 6 games, the Steelers don't owe him anything. I need to recheck that because I remember seeing it that when people were first saying he could sit out the whole season, that came up that it's a max of 6 games. Otherwise, he doesn't get any money from the Steelers and he can't sign elsewhere. And if he's been making this whole thing about money, this whole thing's been about money. So you're going to tell me this man's going to get not take $14.1 million when that's right up there, basically, with what Todd Gurley is getting and stuff. She's just going to skip out on that for what reason? It's hard for me to imagine that he's going to miss any games since this whole thing is about money. That would be really stupid.
Well, what it is he only has to play in 6 games for the franchise tag to be fulfilled. That's what that is.
Fair. I guess he could just play those 2 and then just sit out the rest.
So what he could do is he could theoretically just not show up until week 10. That's the other thing. I guess the other thing is that I guess just the one thing that's interesting is that Bell would be leaving $855K roughly on the table every week, but is he really that concerned about his his stock and free agency that he would be okay with just only playing in 6 games with Pittsburgh, and then just trying to get his long-term deal, just basically doing everything he can to get to free agency?
See, I just don't know. I feel like 855 is a lot to leave on a table per week. Again, this whole thing has been about money because the Steelers didn't want to guarantee him money. If he's going to skip out on guaranteed money, that's almost ironic. It's almost ironic because the deal that he wanted like a $16 million deal, just like Todd Gurley's, with like at least 60% of it guaranteed. Well, with this 14.1, it's all guaranteed, and he's just skipping out on himself. So like, it's like almost ironic. I don't know, man.
It's interesting because conventional wisdom would say play, but at the same time, the only way to really assure that he does get paid next year is to not get hurt, basically, which he would still have to play. It's a very weird paradox, and I still think that what would make the most sense is to play, but at the same time, I'm not him. I'm not in his shoes, and apparently the long-term deal is more important to him than the single game check. At least that's what it would seem like if Bell does not report. Now, it is worth mentioning that his agent said that it's going to be pretty much the same thing this year as it was last year. That obviously has not been the case because Bell was back on Labor Day last year, but there wasn't anything to suggest that he was going to miss time. But then again, the Steelers don't seem to know. It's a very weird situation with Bell already having, the theoretical 1 foot out the door. I don't know how that's gonna work when all of a sudden one day in week 12 he's gonna pull up with a hammy or he's gonna have concussion-like symptoms that just don't go away. Kind of like, I don't know if you paid attention to the Kawhi Leonard situation in San Antonio of the NBA this past year. He was hurt. The team doctors cleared him, but his doctors didn't.
I had no idea about that. Now I didn't see that.
Well, basically, he made it seem like he was hurt, or he made it seem like his injuries were much worse than they were, so he wouldn't have to play, or he basically just wouldn't play at all, just to not risk injury with free agency upcoming.
I hope that's not what Bell does.
Well, because if that's what happens, you're talking about a locker room breakdown, you're talking about more toxicity and just more drama than we already could possibly imagine, and we've already seen quite a lot the last few years.
Yeah, that would be the new drama. Mostly the past years have been Martavis Bryant and stuff, but that would definitely be the new drama in the locker room.
And that would take the cake, and that's honestly something I don't know I want to talk about all year, but here we go. Just it very well could be, but until then, let's move on. Let's talk about the roster itself. And as we know, the Steelers started making cut downs. I guess, what was the most interesting position? Because I don't want to do this necessarily in order. What position group on offense interested you the most or surprised you the most, or just the position group you want to talk about the most? I'll be honest with you. I think the running back position interested me the most.
The running back position was very interesting. I was surprised when Ridley got little to no snaps on special teams, and it surprised me that he actually made it to the roster when he didn't even get to show much offensively because he was injured. I do think Fitzgerald Toussaint was a better option because of his special teams ability, but apparently the Steelers thought otherwise. It's interesting to note, though, that Jalen Samuels is listed ahead of Ridley on the depth chart, so that means the team thinks pretty highly of Samuels. Well, I wasn't even sure he would make the roster. I forget that if in my final roster I put him on there or not. I think I ultimately went with Fitzgerald Toussaint over him. So apparently the team thinks way higher of Jalen Samuels than I did. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens when LeVeon Bell comes back and they don't have a roster exemption for him if they cut down who they lose on the running back position. But what do you think of the running backs, Steelers captain, Lev Bell, James Conner, Jalen Samuels, Stephen Ridley, and Rosie Nix?
Well, the attention was obviously paid towards the bottom end of that position group. We already know the three guys, Connor, Bell, and Nix, being the guys that were making the team. The question was, were the Steelers going to keep a third running back or four running backs, and who are they going to be? I mentioned that it was between three guys for one or two positions, and I thought the guy that had probably the best chance was the guy that ended up getting cut in Fitzgerald Toussaint. He was a good special teams player and a pretty good pass protector, but it wasn't enough. Jalen Samuels really showed a lot of good things the last few weeks of the preseason, enough for the coaching staff to say that it wasn't worth exposing him to waivers and exposing him on the practice squad. So they just cut Toussaint, and as far as Ridley goes, I see him on the roster kind of as insurance for however long Bell does sit out. Ridley offers very little to nothing on special teams, so whenever Bell would show up, he wouldn't be active anyways, so I think his roster spot is in danger, even though he did make the initial 53. The whole Bell situation throws this roster into a state of constant flux. We honestly don't know exactly what this roster is going to look like until Bell gets back, so I mean, it could be an influx state, or rather, it won't be in flux until he shows up, so it could be a while. It could be till theoretically week 10, but it could also be tomorrow, too, so we don't really know. Elsewhere, Austin, I kind of like the... well, let's jump to the tight end position. I kind of like how that one broke down. Nice and easy. The three starters, McDonald, James, and Grimble, are the three regulars. And the one guy that made the practice squad was the surprise acquisition, Bucky Hodges. You already know the guy that you looked at last year in the pre-draft process. He didn't make the team, but he made the practice squad, and he had a surprisingly nice preseason. Did you like the way the tight end position shook down in the end?
I guess. I was a little bit upset that they didn't keep Bucky Hodges on the actual roster in case of injuries, but apparently the Steelers are pretty confident in the tight ends that they will be ready for Week 1. I thought they should have used that that technical 54th roster slot on Bucky Hodges just in case the tight end group wasn't ready to go. But still, later on in the year, as you said, he's on the practice squad. I won't be surprised if he makes it to the roster later, because how often Vance has been hurt in the one season we've had him. He was hurt when he was traded for. He was hurt during the season a few times. He was hurt now in this preseason. It's just, I'm not going to be surprised if Bucky Hodges gets called up. I'm glad he's staying with the Steelers, at least on the practice squad.
Yeah, that pretty much covers it. I mean, there's not a whole lot to say. As far as Hodges go, we already know he was a pretty solid pass catcher. He showed some interesting things as a blocker. I've said it time and time again on this podcast already. He's not a great blocker, but he shows heart, and he definitely earned a chance to make the Steelers roster, and they think highly enough of him to keep him around. Pharaoh McKeever and Christian Scotland-Williamson were the guys that were cut. Williamson made it on the practice squad as the international player, and as you were kind enough to write it as a note later, McKeever ended up signing on the practice squad of the Browns. I don't think he has a future there, but it is interesting to note he caught on. I feel like McKeever just wasn't he was just a guy this preseason.
Yeah, he was just kind of hanging around. He's just kind of there. He made one 10-yard catch. That is all I remember from him.
Let's go to the offensive line, Austin. There was a big surprise here, maybe one of the bigger surprises of the entire team, and that was the fact that the Steelers kept 9 when we both had them pegged at 8, since we all knew the 5 starters and the 3 backups that we kind of had been expecting all along. But Zach Banner, surprisingly enough, makes the team as an extra tackle. Patrick Morris and R.J. Prince make the practice squad. What'd you make of them keeping 9 instead of the 8 like we thought they were going to keep?
Well, I really didn't like it, actually. I know Zach Banner had a really good preseason, but it was a short one as he was brought on late. And when the Steelers have to activate LeVeon Bell or Eli Rogers to the active roster, Banner may be the first one gone. We'll see, though. Banner was the only real surprise on the offensive line. I mean, I think he could have been on the practice squad is all I'm saying. I think that he didn't show enough where another team would have been like, I need this guy. but maybe I'm wrong. I mean, honestly, the Steelers got him late in the preseason. He was available when everyone had 90-man rosters. So, like, what I really think he could have made it to the practice squad, and I think that spot, that roster spot should have been used for someone else. Maybe actually put Bucky Hodges on it. Maybe I don't know. I think that another cornerback should have stayed because of injuries, but I mean, I guess time will tell. I again think Zach Banner might be the first guy off, depending on what the Steelers want to do. We'll see. What do you think of Zach Banner actually making it?
It was definitely a surprise. As time has gone on, though, I'll be honest with you, the more I've thought about it, it's become less of a shock to me. We already knew the top 8 guys here, but with Chuksa Okorafor being the swing tackle, he was kind of inconsistent. We saw some good things from him, but we saw that he really doesn't have the technique quite down yet, and that's not too surprising. But at the same time, the Steelers wanted to have another guy around just in case Okorafor, if he is forced into action, that you have a capable backup in case he doesn't play well. And I'm not saying Banner's a good NFL player or anything like that, but he does have pedigree, and he has some experience. So keeping him around, I think, was a good idea, just because you really don't know what you're going to get with Okorafor yet. So it's good to have a nice little insurance policy there. Next, let's talk about the wide receivers. This one was probably, just like the tight ends, was probably the easiest position to go with. I mean, we already knew the guys that were making the team last week because of injuries to guys like Damone Patterson and Marcus Tucker. So I guess the only real questions that we had was who was going to make the practice squad, and there were a couple surprises, weren't there?
Yeah. In terms of the roster, you mentioned it. If Damone Patterson didn't get turf toe, and maybe if Marcus Tucker didn't hurt his ankle, they might have challenged Justin Hunter or Darius Hayward-Bay for their spots, but there's just no chance of both of them injured. I think that after that, it was left to scraps. I mean, Tevin Jones was really the only guy that showed anything in the preseason, and he showed it in the last game, and that wasn't enough for me to say, okay, he beats out Darius Hayward-Bay for his roster spot, especially when Darius Hayward-Bay's roster spot isn't an offensive spot, really. It's mostly for special teams. But I think we both saw this exact set of wide receivers coming. There was really no surprise here when this was released. However, you did mention the practice squad, and I am beyond surprised that they brought back Trey Griffey. I don't see it. I felt like the same way about Pharaoh McKeever. He's just like a guy. I mean, he has some unique ancestry. He has some relatives that are cool, but they're cool in baseball. But, like, other than that, he's just a guy. And I thought that roster spot, that practice squad spot could have been used for something else. I didn't exactly see the hype in him at all. I mean, Tevin Jones, I understand. Tevin Jones, that final preseason game, while he had some 1 or 2 bad drops, he almost had 3 touchdowns. He had 2 touchdowns in that game. So I see why you keep Tevin Jones around, but not Trey Griffey. What do you think about the wide receivers, Kep?
You covered it pretty well. Patterson and Tucker could revert to IR, which means they could be eligible to return to camp next year. That'd be a good way to give them one more chance to make the team, and it gives you another chance to get one more look at those 2 guys who were outside shots to make the team, but still know the team relatively well. So it's that's interesting to see if that'll happen or if they get an injury settlement and are waived. Jones had a solid final preseason game, but did nothing else of note. I wouldn't have kept him around on the practice squad personally. The only reason I'll go the opposite of you, Austin, I would have had Griffey over Jones, is just because the coaches really liked him. I know he didn't really show a lot in the games, but the coaches thought enough of him to give him snaps with the first team offense in the 3rd preseason game. He caught a pass from Ben Roethlisberger. I'm not saying that means he's good, but it makes me think that there's more to it than we saw. I know he didn't show a ton, but I am kind of interested by him. But nonetheless, we do have 2 interesting guys on the practice squad. I don't know if they'll amount to anything, but that'll still be cool to monitor. Wrapping up the offense, it's the quarterbacks, and boy, I don't know if there's any other way to say it, but I don't think anyone saw this coming. Not even the sports writers or the media in Pittsburgh saw this coming. Everyone was shocked And the fans finally get what they want. Josh Dobbs makes the team over Landry Jones, who gets cut. And the Steelers rolling with the two young backups behind Big Ben. The new wave of quarterbacks is here.
Yeah, seeing Landry Jones cut was one of the biggest surprises. Like you said, every media outlet did not see it coming. I immediately, the Mark Madden tweets. Mark Madden was getting frustrated with Steelers fans because they kept saying Dobbs was going to make it over Jones before it happened. And he got mad in his tweets and was like, it's not going to happen. And then immediately those tweets were screenshotted and sent right back at him. I didn't get to see his response to it, but it was really funny because he was pissed. And his tweet was like, no, Josh Dobbs will never make it over Landry Jones. Get that through your head. He was mad about it. But when it happened, the cut, when I found out about it, I literally called John immediately yelling nonsense about this being such a surprise. It really felt like, it really feels like the wrong move still, despite Landry Jones not yet meeting with other teams. And that's no slight to Josh Dobbs. I thought he had a fantastic preseason and showed a lot of development from his first year. He definitely deserved a roster spot, but I just didn't see it actually happening unless the Steelers kept 4 quarterbacks. And now he has big shoes to fill. That's what this really means. On the Steelers' first depth chart, he's listed as the backup to Big Ben, and Ben even came out and said that he's going to have to prove he's as valuable as Jones was off the field to show why he should be number 2. Still, the move was shocking nonetheless. And, I mean, at the moment it feels wrong, but I guess if there's an injury, as of right now, Landry Jones could still be signed back if need be. I haven't heard anything about Landry Jones scheduling a meeting with the team yet. So what do you think about it? Do you have anything else to add?
I do, but you got me thinking about the whole Mark Madden tweets, and you can tell at the exact moment when he found the news. And before I get to that, I got the notification that Jones was cut on my phone coming home from work, and I literally glanced down and I saw it was like a Bleacher Report notification. It was like Steelers make surprise decision to cut Jones or something. I pick up my phone, and then the next thing I see is Austin calling me. So it was like I just had enough time to read it because I was going to call you. I had just enough time to read it before your call came in, and so that was a very interesting moment. And then as far as Madden goes, he had a firestorm of tweets, but the first one was Steelers made horrific fanboy mistake going into an all-or-nothing season without a backup with a backup that's never taken a regular season snap is as stupid as anything this franchise has ever done. Unspeakable error. I'd like to know who decided that. Probably the GM and coach. That'd be my guess. But what else? I don't feel I'm wrong and I regret nothing. I said the Steelers bleeped up. They made an amazingly stupid decision. The only thing that can bail out the Steelers if Ben gets hurt is Juju being in all caps lit AF. That one's interesting. What else? Oh, come on. Where was it? There were some other good ones, I guarantee you. There was one, I don't know where it is, but there was one where he said, this move has Tomlin written all over it. My thoughts were, yeah, right? Isn't that what you would want, is your coach making those decisions on who makes the team and who doesn't? Isn't that what he should be doing? I mean, am I missing something there?
I don't think you're missing anything.
Now, I will agree with Mark Madden on one aspect. I don't think it was the best idea. I mean, I've had a lot of time to sit and digest it. I'm not as against it as I was when it first happened. This one was certainly out of left field. The upside of Rudolph and Josh Dobbs as the backups is opposed to the veteran presence and experience of Jones. They're quite polar opposites. As far as Dobbs goes, we already knew Rudolph was making the team, so Dobbs did his part to stake a claim to a roster spot, and he's very deserving. But I don't know if he's ready to be a starting quarterback if Ben goes down this year, at least not in the first half of this season. He's never taken a regular season snap, and we don't know yet how he'll respond in certain situations. It's very interesting indeed, and furthermore, I can't stress this enough. I feel like Landry Jones would still give the Steelers the best chance to win a game if Roethlisberger went down at any point this season. And I don't have the same faith in Dobbs or even Rudolph that I do Jones. It was a tough decision. I will give the Steelers credit for making that kind of a bold decision, but it will be tough if Roethlisberger misses a game or two or has to miss part of a game that requires good play from the quarterback, and the Steelers don't get that from Dobbs or Rudolph. It's one of those things. The last 3 times the Steelers have went to the Super Bowl, backups have played key roles in either winning games or starting and winning games, and every game counts in the NFL. And I mentioned it on the last show, but if the Steelers lose, I think one game, if the Steelers lose a game in Lambeau Field started by Charlie Batch, the Steelers don't go to the playoffs in 2005. If Byron Leftwich doesn't help the Steelers win a game on Monday Night Football against the Redskins after Roethlisberger left with an injury, they don't have a first-round bye. They don't win the division. And, just if they don't go 3-1 at the start of the season in 2010, when Roethlisberger was suspended, the Steelers don't win that division. They don't, it's just a lot of things can happen if the Steelers lose one extra game. I'm not saying that'll happen this year, but it's tough when you don't have a guy that has regular season experience, a guy that's not a proven commodity like Jones is. Again, it's a bold choice. I respect the decision, but I don't think I would have done it. So that's all I really have to say on the quarterback issue. I'd be curious to hear the listeners' thoughts about it. It seems like the general consensus was they were happy that Jones was gone. I think that has more to do with liking what they saw from Dobbs last week and just not liking Jones in general than I think it is more a calculated decision, but time will tell. On the other side of the ball, the defensive line, we'll start with them. That was a pretty simple position, kind of like the tight ends and wide receivers. We already knew who was making it. At least we had a good idea who was going to make it and who wasn't. There was one surprise, though, and it did come on the practice squad. But you want to tell me how you thought it broke down on the D-line?
Yeah, I can't say I'm surprised that LT Walton made it and Levon Hooks didn't. Maybe a little disappointed, but this year just wasn't Hooks' year. LT Walton has just spent longer on the team and has real game experience, which is always valuable. Everyone else makes sense, and it wasn't even a question if you ask me. McColl's has had an amazing preseason and training camp, so he was almost a lock to make it as soon as preseason started when we thought that would be a challenge, but it wasn't at all. And what's funny about that, mentioning the crazy thing about the practice squad, is Joshua Frazier did not even make the practice squad. Joshua Frazier just got straight up cut, and they didn't even bring him back. It's not strange for a late-round pick to be cut and not brought back. It is, however, strange that a late-round pick with connections to the Steelers' defensive line coach doesn't get brought back on the practice squad. They must have really not liked what they saw from him, and that's really unfortunate because it is really hard to just not make it at least a practice squad in your first year with the Steelers as a rookie. That was the big surprise. Ron Hooks did get brought back onto the practice squad as he deserved. He had a really good preseason. I wish Casey Sales was brought back because I thought Casey Sales also had a pretty good preseason, but maybe at the end of the season he'll be brought back, but we'll see. That's really all I have to say about defensive line. What do you have to say? Do you have anything to add?
No, not anything more than what you said. I am kind of disappointed Josh Frazier didn't make it and someone like Jarvian Franklin did on the practice squad, but apparently he just wasn't good enough, and that's all there was to it. He didn't show anything really in the preseason games. He didn't play much. The position battle that was between him and Daniel McCullers ended very quickly. I think it was probably over by the first or second preseason game. So once that happened, it was kind of like, all right, we'll just wait for him to make the practice squad, and it never happened. All right, let's move on to. I guess let's talk about the inside linebackers, because everyone from this position group that I was hoping would make it did actually make it after there were questions about how many inside and outside linebackers were they going to keep. They did keep, obviously, Williams, Bostic, and Matthew Thomas. Matakevich and Fort did make it. Farrington Huguenin made it to the practice squad. Matt Galambos cut, and Keith Kelsey was waived injured. Nothing too surprising here as far as who did stay on the team, just more so they did keep 5 inside linebackers. And are you glad that they did keep 5?
I sure am, because especially there's been talks in the town that Matthew, and they definitely need that. There are only 3 active outside linebackers on the roster as of right now, so I think it was the right move to keep 5 technical inside linebackers on here. There really weren't any surprises here, though. I mean, maybe you could say L.J. Ford is a surprise, but he contributes on special teams, so I thought he was going to be here. Huguenin definitely had a solid preseason in camp, but it just wasn't enough, unfortunately. I think he actually played mostly outside linebacker in the preseason, which he's listed as an inside linebacker for some reason. But maybe next year will be Huguenin's year when Bud Dupree is off doing his thing, probably not coming back to the Steelers. We'll see. That's really all I have to say about inside linebackers. What do you have to say about inside linebackers?
I am glad the Steelers were able to keep all 5 guys that I was talking about on the last podcast. They each contribute in their own way. And the upside of Matthew Thomas gives this position hope going forward. I think you'll agree with me that the thing that was most disappointing about this past draft is that we felt like there was nothing to look forward to at the inside linebacker position. And that is what Matthew Thomas gives this position, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
There's definitely hope going forward that this could be a staple at this position. So having him there is very good. As far as who was cut, Galambos had no chance. I forgot he was on the team, to be honest. We determined that on the last episode. Huguenin, who again lined it up on the edge more than inside, is going to get one more shot on the practice squad. I didn't realize he was 26 years old, so I guess he could get better. But this is probably it for him. I can't imagine the Steelers would take a chance on a guy, or I don't even think he would be practice squad eligible at age 27. I've never heard of practice squad players that are that old next year. So this is probably his last chance, or rather next summer will be if he's kept around that long. So he's solid, but I don't know if he's going to be anything more than what he is. All right, we skipped over the outside linebackers because I wanted to talk about the 5 inside linebackers, but outside linebackers an interesting scenario right now. The Steelers only have 3 active guys, the starters, and Bud Dupree and T.J. Watt. Anthony Chickalo's the backup. But beyond that, Ola Adeni, who made the team, was moved to injured reserve, and Keon Adams, the only other outside linebacker, was cut. And although he was placed on the practice squad, the Steelers don't seem to have plans to re-sign him to the active roster. I know we talked about a potential addition being made at this position with the new cap space that was cleared up, but what do you make of just 3 outside linebackers?
I can tell you I'm not the biggest fan at all. Hopefully the Steelers bring in one, but right now these 3 is all they got. It's just not comforting with T.J. Watt just getting back from an injury just a few days before the last preseason game. It's so easy to re-aggravate an injury. I'm just a little worried is all. They didn't even elect to put Keon Adams on the roster when they put Ola Suntoni on IR. It's just all weird. The talk of, I already said this, but Matthew Thomas is going to be playing a little outside linebacker according to reports. I don't know how truthful it is. I've only seen a few reports of it. None of them were from like the Steelers or Mike Tomlin or Keith Butler. Nothing like that. But I guess that might be the move since they're only keeping 3 on the roster at the moment, because that's scary. One injury and you got Anthony Chickalo out there, and then what if Anthony Chickalo just gets hurt? Then what are you down to? You're going to make an inside linebacker go to the outside, I guess. I guess you're going to force Matthew Thomas out there. It's not a good situation, especially when both your starting outside linebackers have been hurt this preseason. I mean, Bud Dupree only had a concussion, but still, it's just not a comforting feeling. What do you think about the 3 outside linebackers the Steelers currently have on the roster?
Before that, I have a quick announcement to make. Hold up. I believe... Oh, come on. I thought our league was full because I looked at the owners and it said that we were all full. Oh, we must be missing one. That's so weird. Right here on the owners page, it said there's an owner name for every team. Oh, that's weird. There's only 9. Oh, okay. So okay. My bad. All right. So there is still one open spot. Whoops. Anyways, back to what I was talking or what you were talking about. The outside linebackers. There's definitely concern with even the starters. You mentioned with Watt, he was injured most of this preseason, and Dupree is just not a guy that stood out much lately. They didn't like Keon Adams enough to make it to the active roster, even though he's on the practice squad. I still think someone's getting added here. I don't know who or what it's going to be, but it'll be interesting. We gotta wait, I guess. But I'm definitely not comfortable with only 3 active guys right now. That's concerning. Cornerback, the Steelers only kept 5. Artie Burns, Joe Hayden, Mike Hilton, Cameron Sutton, and Cody Sensabaugh. Brian Allen to the practice squad, a surprising cut. What do you think about this position group?
I'm actually genuinely surprised I didn't keep Brian Allen on the active roster. With Mike Hilton a little banged up, I thought they were going to keep him just in case for the first week, but I guess they were confident Hilton will be fine. The only other person that was even competing for a spot was Deshaun Phillips, and he played himself right off the roster. He had such a terrible preseason. It was really rough for Deshaun Phillips, who was the ex-Redskin that the Steelers traded for last preseason and kept around for his special teams abilities. Didn't even do much on special teams, to be honest, but really, this was just all about Brian Allen. I thought the Steelers liked him a little bit more. I thought he was going to keep around on the actual roster, but I think he did the same thing Deshaun Phillips did, just not to that extent. He played himself off the roster. Those first 3 games were miserable. He finished it off right, but that was against 4th string, and I guess that resonated with the Steelers that he still needed more development. So they sent him to the practice squad. He made it there, and he's probably not going to be signed off by any team. So it gives him another year to develop, and maybe next year will be his year where he turns out to be, he develops into a starting caliber or a 53-man caliber cornerback. Do you have anything to add about the cornerbacks?
Not a whole lot outside of what you've already said. I mean, just at the end of the day, the Steelers didn't think Brian Allen made enough of a jump from year 1 to year 2 to keep him on the roster. He had some nice moments in the preseason, but he was mostly disappointing and left a lot to be desired. This cornerback group has the chance to be a pretty good unit for the first time in a long time, but it all depends on Artie Burns and Cameron Sutton. I think we know what we're going to get from Joe Hayden and Mike Hilton, not to mention Cody Sensabaugh, but better play from Burns and more play from Sutton could mean a lot for this team going forward. Last but not least, how about the safety position?
Well, I can't believe this team is rolling with 6 safeties for now. That's a little bit ridiculous if you ask me. My one hope is that they are, in fact, hiding the dollar defense where they use a bunch of safeties on the field at once. That, or maybe they plan to use Morgan Burnett as an extra linebacker at times and throw Edmonds as a starting safety or something of that sort. I don't really know. I don't really know what the plan is. I'm a little bit confused on why they needed 6 safeties or thought that 6 safeties was necessary. But really the most surprising to me was electing to take Dangerfield on the roster. I didn't even consider it a possibility after last year where they kept him on the practice squad for a lot of the year. It seemed like such a low chance with the safety room being better than it was last year. So it shocked me that it took me it took me back a little bit. Also, I'm just a little bit surprised they decided to keep Allen. I think they could have gotten away with stashing him on the practice squad and called him up if they need him. But I guess they didn't think that, or maybe they just wanted all the safeties on the roster because they're going to be running a dollar defense. I'm really unsure what the thought process was behind this. I wish that this was addressed in the press conference today. I don't understand. I'm struggling to understand why so many safeties were kept and in lieu of other positions. What do you think of all the safeties kept?
First, I just wanted to say poor Malik Golden. He goes most likely to IR. 2 years in a row, he's had a shot at a roster spot disappear completely with an unlucky injury at the end of the preseason. This last one was bad. But as far as the roster goes, the idea that the Steelers are going to be playing with 3 safeties most of the time on defense is supported with this turnout here. Typically, you see only 4 or 5 safeties, and you rarely see 6. At first, the thought was Morgan Burnett was going to go to IR, but it's clear he's not going to. The bottom end of this position was confusing because Nat Burray was cut. He was re-signed a day later, and the Steelers didn't want to cut Dangerfield because he's subject to waivers, and Burray isn't, so they cut Burray and then re-signed him. I still don't quite understand that, but the Steelers have two solid special teams guys in Burray and Dangerfield. Keeping two of those types of players was surprising in its own right, but was most shocking was seeing that Marcus Allen made the team. Not that he was bad or anything, but I just thought that he was injured for most of the summer and he didn't have a lot of chances to prove himself, so it wouldn't have been hard to get him on the practice squad, but apparently the coaches thought that it was too much to risk and they liked him better than they liked Brian Allen. Yes, I think he took Allen's last spot, but the Steelers just didn't think he was worth exposing to waivers, so 6 safeties is what you're going to roll with. So out of nowhere, which was a complete shock, Marcus Allen does make the team. Let's finish up with special teams really quick. Matt Weil cut over Jordan Berry. All I'm going to say is that what was the reason of bringing in another punter and saying there was an open competition when clearly there was not? Like, you lied to us when you said that. Matt Weil did everything you could have done outside of executing fake punts to perfection to outplay Jordan Berry, and yet he still has a job, and I do not understand that.
Yeah, Weil had the second best grade of a punter this preseason, behind only Michael Dixon of the Seahawks, according to Pro Football Focus, and still Barry won the job. It really just didn't come as a surprise to me, despite Weil outplaying Barry in the preseason. I kind of just in the back of my head knew that the Steelers were just going to keep Barry. It didn't matter what Weil did, as you said, there was no competition really. That was maybe it was just to drive Barry to try harder, but I don't really know why. As if I was making the choice, I would have taken Weil because he was better and cheaper. But for some reason, that doesn't make sense to the Steelers. The better and cheaper option was not a good option for the Steelers. That's all I have to say.
Practice squad, 11 guys with the international Christian Scotland Williamson. They are Keon Adams, Brian Allen, Levon Hooks, Farrington Huguenin, Jarvian Franklin, Trey Griffey, Tevin Jones, Patrick Morris, RJ Prince, and Bucky Hodges. The only one I'm really questioning is Jarvian Franklin, but I think you are questioning that one as well, so go ahead and tee off on that one.
Yeah, it baffles me that they thought they needed a spot for Jarvian Franklin, especially when they have Stephen Ridley waiting, and they already have currently 5 running backs on the roster, if you count LeVeon Bell. I just felt like, 5 backs. But I just didn't understand why they thought they needed to stash him. I didn't see anything good from him in the preseason. I didn't hear anything good from him in training camp. I guess the Steelers saw something in camp, the staff, because I thought it was a questionable move to save a spot for him. I think that spot could have been used for someone else. Other than that, I'm glad that Huguenin, Hodges, Hooks, Brian Allen, and Tevin Jones got there. They were the guys I was hoping would get there, and I think that they could be solid if they need to be called up. But that's really all I have to add about the practice squad, guys. Do you have anything else to say?
I do not. Last thing about the roster, who was your biggest surprise addition to the roster, or really surprise player that made the team of the entire squad? I guess, who surprised you the most that it was like they actually made the team?
I'm going to go with the Dangerfield. I didn't even consider that a possibility with Nat Burr being brought in, specifically because he was great on special teams. And when he was on the 53-man roster for most of last year in a worse safety room, I just didn't see him making it at all. I thought there was zero chance with Nat Burr being a safety special teams specialist, and then also Dangerfield not even making the roster for most of the year last year. It's confusing. I was blown away by that. What do you think was the biggest surprise?
It was definitely Josh Dobbs staying with the Steelers over Landry Jones, and Mike Tomlin said it had nothing to do with what Landry Jones did, so that means it was all Josh Dobbs. And I'll be honest, I would have bet money on this if I had the option to. I don't agree with this move as far as this year goes, and I worry it could spite the Steelers in the backside, but it could turn out into quite the interesting move. The new wave of the quarterback position is here, and it's going to be interesting to see, but you got 2 young guys backing up the wily veteran now. Moving on to NFL news now. The big news of this week before the NFL games get started, Khalil Mack, a 2020 second-round pick and a conditional 2020 fifth-round pick, has been traded from the Oakland Raiders to the Chicago Bears in exchange for the Bears' first-round picks this upcoming year and the year after, 2019 and 2020, a 2020 third-round pick, and a 2019 sixth-round pick. A lot of moving parts here, but the big ones were 2 first-round picks to the Raiders and Khalil Mack to the Bears. Who won this trade?
I think the Bears won this quite clearly. They immediately got an extension on with Khalil Mack to make him the highest-paid defensive player in the league. And they somehow managed to get a second-round pick out of it in 2020. I know that's 2 years from now, but when I first saw the trade, I was like, oh, no, the Raiders did it. The Raiders got rid of Khalil Mack. Like, I was already like, wow, the Bears probably won this trade because you don't just get – you get to have as many first-round picks as you want. The truth is about 60% of those picks are probably going to be bust. The other 40%, like 20, like half of those are going to be just okay players, and maybe the other half is pretty good, but that's it. And now you got a star pass rusher in Khalil Mack. You know that he is going to be great. You know that he might crack the Hall of Fame one day. We don't know. His career is not done. It's pretty early in his career still. But he plays like a Hall of Famer. He plays like a future Hall of Famer. And essentially, I know that the Raiders weren't going to pay him. I just think they should. He was the star of the team. Like, there's no one else really good on that team on the defense. The defense is kind of hurt for the Raiders. And now it just looks even more terrible. I really don't like the Raiders' defense this year. But as a Steelers fan, I'm elated to see this trade. The 6 wins I thought they would get when we talked about the trade for Ryan Switzer has now been downgraded in my eyes to about 4. That's what happens when you get rid of a possible Hall of Fame pass rusher, which is great since the Steelers have their 6th-round pick. So it would be nice if they finished like at the worst. But if I was a Raiders fan, this is horrible. This is terrible. I can't believe that they gave up a 2nd-round pick, and then not only that, they gave up a conditional 5th. Like, they gave up more than that 2nd-round pick. I would have been upset if they gave them a 6th. If the Raiders offered them Khalil Mack and a conditional 6th, I thought they were already losing. So this was bad for me. I thought the Raiders got absolutely destroyed in this trade. I guess Khalil Mack forced their hand since they didn't want to pay him, but I just don't know why they didn't want to pay him. I think Raiders fans are going to hate John Gruden for a long time following the season. I don't know if John Gruden's going to survive past this season. I don't know if John Gruden's going to finish this season. It is not going well for him already thus far, and the year hasn't even started. What do you have to say about the Khalil Mack trade?
Well, it sure looks like with this kind of move that John Gruden's trying to make the time in Oakland for the Raiders, the time that's remaining there, as miserable as possible for the faithful fans there. He knows he has a new fan base waiting for him in Las Vegas, and I think he feels like the best thing to do is to rebuild. So when they get to Vegas, they're going to be either ready to break out or will be breaking out already. Not that really makes any sense. 2 years ago, this team was talked about as the biggest threat to the Patriots in the AFC, and now they look like doormats. Thank God the Steelers don't have to face Khalil Mack now, and now that makes the game in Oakland that much more winnable, which is good to see. Beyond that, there's a reason that typically whenever star players are traded, the team that trades the star player away, typically loses that trade in recorded sports history. I mean, history goes to show you if you get rid of a star player, you're not going to win that trade. So that's really all there is to it. We could be proven wrong, but I just don't see it. One guy who had the potential of being a superstar is facing another suspension, traded and now cut by the Oakland Raiders just a few months after being acquired by them. Martavis Bryant, a suspension looming. What more is there to say about him?
There's really not much else to say. John Gruden was asked if he knew that this was going to happen, would he have made the same trade? And he said, yeah, he would have made this trade. So I honestly, as soon as I saw that, I laughed. I was like, damn, you're really committed to being stupid, huh? Like, you really stupid. But this was a mistake on the Raiders' part. They got fleeced. That's it. That's really it. Martavis Bryant, his career is over. He's not coming back to the NFL. This is done. He's done. It's over for him. It's a shame for him. He had so much star potential, but he screwed himself, and then he screwed the Raiders, because this is another reason why John Gruden is going to be hated for a while. Getting rid of a third-round pick for a guy that did not even make it to the regular season. It's terrible.
It could go down as one of the most lopsided trades of all time if Mason Rudolph ends up being not only a starting quarterback for the Steelers, but like, what if he becomes a guy that wins the Super Bowl for the Steelers? Then you're talking about one of the most, probably one of the, if not the most lopsided trade in NFL history. You're talking about a dude that lasted 3 months with the team. And it is sad. It's while it's hilarious and fun to poke fun at the Raiders and John Gruden for making a terrible move, it's honestly sad that a guy like Bryant, who had all the potential and talent in the world, just threw it all away. And it is sad. The one thing that he's facing with the suspension, it's indefinite or a year long. That's what Josh Gordon had. And you could say, yeah, Josh Gordon came back from that. Well, I wouldn't call it an easy road back to the NFL that Gordon has had. And beyond that, Gordon led the NFL in receiving yards at least 1 year, maybe 2 years in a row. I don't remember to be sure, but he had one really good year, and Bryant's never cracked 1,000 yards before, so there's no reason to think that he doesn't have the same thing that you can fall back on. He hasn't proven himself as much, so this is definitely it for him. I'd be shocked if he got another look.
It's not happening.
No way. Last bit of Raiders news, they picked up Bills quarterback A.J. McCarron for a fifth-round pick. McCarron loses the quarterback battle to Nathan Peterman in Buffalo. What do you make of the move for both teams?
I guess the Raiders got the backup quarterback they were looking for. I think that they should try trading the Steelers, because I kept looking up to see which one they traded. I think they traded their own because there was no specification. I think that they're going to have an early pick in the round, and I think they should have probably tried trading the Steelers pick for it. But, I mean, they probably did, and the Bills probably said no. So, we'll see.
Yeah, it really seems like A.J. McCarron missed out on his only opportunity to be a starting quarterback in this league. Nathan Peterman just stole it from him. 49ers running back Jerick McKinnon is out for the season, torn ACL. I'll be honest with you, I think that this makes a team that's already overhyped, in my opinion, even worse in the San Francisco 49ers. I don't think they're going to be that good.
See, I actually think this is a lateral move. I didn't think McKinnon was that great. He's just always been a great pass catcher, I feel like. I feel like Matt Breida and then also Alfred Morris should be fine and essentially do exactly what Jerick McKinnon was going to do, just in the form of two people. Like, Matt Breida averaged 4.4 yards a carry when he got to play last year, and he's also a great pass catcher. I thought it was a shame he didn't get the start originally. So we'll see what happens. I agree with you that they're overhyped. I think that losing Jerick McKinnon doesn't do anything for them. Everyone else hyped up Jerick McKinnon, mostly because of fantasy, but I wasn't a fan.
The Cowboys cut veteran kicker Dan Bailey. Kind of a surprise, but he did have a rough season last year.
Yeah, I don't even know who the new kicker is, to be honest with you. As soon as I saw it, I was like, wow, I can't believe they cut a guy that's been one of the most accurate kickers in NFL history. That's terrible.
You think about it, Bailey has missed now, with this past season, 25 career field goals. 5 of them came last year, so that was a concerning trend. But I'll be honest with you, I think that comes back to bite him in the backside.
I agree. I think it's probably going to hit him. I think their new kicker isn't going to be as good as Dan Bailey was, and it's going to hurt them, especially when they have no passing game next year. No offense.
Last bit of NFL news, some former Steelers finding jobs, or at least some opportunities for jobs. Matt Weil on the practice squad of the Minnesota Vikings now. He found a spot. We already mentioned Pharaoh McKeever to the Browns, and Fitzgerald Toussaint met with the Colts on Monday. No word of him signing there, but if he did, it would be interesting to note that Jordan Todman also ended up there, for those who don't remember, when D'Angelo Williams and LeVeon Bell were injured in the 2015 regular season. Toussaint and Todman carried the load in the 2 playoff games against the Bengals and Broncos relatively effectively, too. Todman ended up going to the Colts after his tenure with the Steelers ended, so it'd be interesting to see if Toussaint followed suit. But I'll be keeping an eye on that because I mentioned before, Toussaint is one of my favorite players. All right, just before we wrap this up, it's time to get into our pick'em section of this season. The season opener, Falcons at the Eagles, Super Bowl 52 banner being unveiled. The Eagles, for the first time ever, celebrated as Super Bowl champions on their field to open up the season. What do you got in this one?
Well, I'm going to take the Falcons to win outright in this. The Eagles are supposed to win by 2. That's their spread. But I think the Falcons win outright. There's a trend that happens every year, and it throws everyone off. I believe it's since 1998. It might be since 1990. But 4 previous playoff teams that went the year prior don't end up in the playoffs the next year. And I think that's going to happen with the Eagles. I think the Eagles are one-year wonders. And it's easy to listen to this and say, "Wow, this guy's an idiot. He's going to pick the Super Bowl team to not make the playoffs the next year." Well, the Panthers and the Broncos following their Super Bowl, both those teams didn't make the playoffs in that following year. So I'm going to pick the Eagles as one of those teams to not return. I think the Giants rise back up to power in the NFC East. So I just explain my reasoning why I think the Falcons are going to win. I think the Eagles aren't as good as they were last year. I don't think they're going to do as good. So Falcons win outright. What do you have in this game?
I actually am going to have the Eagles covering here. I don't have a ton of reasoning for it. I think the crowd's going to be behind them. And I've always kind of thought the Falcons are a bit overrated. I don't know how the whole Julio situation is going on out there. But I just think it'll be a little crazy, and I think that'll play to the Eagles' favor this week. I don't think they're going to repeat, obviously, but I think it'll be a good year for the Eagles, even if it's not as good as what last year was. So I'll take the Eagles to cover, and with that, we are all set for this episode of the Stronger Than Steel podcast. If you have any questions, email the show at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com. Check out our website, strongerthansteelnfl.blogspot.com. Austin, thank you so much for joining me today. When we speak again, we'll be talking about Week 1 Steelers versus Browns. Can't wait.
It's exciting. Football season is back in just technically one more day from right now. It's 12:43 on Wednesday morning, so tomorrow will be the first game between the Falcons and the Eagles.
Alrighty. Until then, ladies and gentlemen, thank you as always for listening to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. Have a great night.
Goodbye.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.